What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. And this one is some of my early thoughts ahead of the Game Week 7 deadline. So I'm going to go through some key players, talk about my utter disaster of a wild card, and go through some notes from the weekend as well. So as always, if you find the video useful and enjoy it, make sure to give it a like, hit that subscribe button if you haven't done so already, and check out Fantasy Football Hub using the links in the description below. The 50% off offer ends today for yearly membership. So if you want to sign up for the rest of the season and into next one as well, now is the time to do it. You can still sign up after that, of course, and monthly subscriptions are always there if you want to just check things out. But if you've been thinking about doing it, like I said, the 50% off yearly membership ends today. So if you want to make use of all their tools, links in the description below. Otherwise, let's talk about a certain Cole Palmer. So we've got to start with the guy that scored 4 goals in the first half against Brighton. That is, of course, Cole Palmer, the first player in Premier League history to do that, by the way. And when you think about the amount of ridiculous forwards that have been in the Premier League, it's unreal that he's the one that's gone and done it. And when I first saw the goals as a non-owner, I tried to console myself because I did briefly look at picking him on wildcard. I was probably never going to go for it, but I did look at it. So to console myself, I'm thinking, okay, there was a penalty in there. Lots of players take penalties. They're quite hard to predict. On another day, it might not have even been given because I think it was a little bit soft. I see why they gave it, but you might not get that in another game. So he's got a penalty, fair enough. He scored a ridiculously good free kick. There's loads of great videos going around on social media of different angles of that. But how often is he going to score a free kick quite like that week to week? Probably not that often. So then you could say, well, it was kind of just 2 goals, even though it clearly wasn't, right? It was 4. I'm just trying to console myself at this point. But then when you watch the highlights, he could have got even more returns. The guy's just absolutely brilliant. And when you look at the numbers on the FPL page, he's showing up at 2.41 expected goals on his own. 0.62 expected assists. 3 expected goal involvement from one player is absolutely insane. Even if you take away the penalty, it's like still 2.3 expected goal involvement on your own. That's more than double what Man United put up against Spurs yesterday. He's just ridiculous. He's just absolutely ridiculous. And I don't know what I can really say. Like, if you want to bring him in, you should just bring him in. I'm not sure I would start ripping your team apart to do it. If you've got to take like -4s, -8s, it's a little bit more difficult to justify it, I think. Like, I still wouldn't look at him and think he's absolutely essential. If you haven't got him, you've got to bring him in. Because how often is someone going to score 4 goals in a first half or 4 goals in a game, right? It doesn't happen that often. So I don't think we need to panic. But the simple fact is, if you want to get him in, you should, because 3 of the next 4 fixtures are really good. Forest at home in 7, Newcastle at home in 9, Man United away in 10. If I was trying to play devil's advocate here and provide a different angle for why you might not want to bring him in, it's great how well he did, right? And I'm not trying to take away from the amount of goals and how good of a player he is and how good of an FPL pick he is. Brighton did play into Chelsea's hands quite a lot. Like, if you go and watch the highlights, I'm not sure what Brighton were doing half of the time. And I also think they missed Van Heck quite a lot. Playing Forest at home is not going to be the same. We saw how well Forest did away to Liverpool. They defended brilliantly. They're not going to come and play like a high line or anything like that, let you get in behind. They're going to sit in. It's going to be much more difficult for Chelsea. Of course, Cole Palmer can get returns. He could go and get another 2 or 3, but it is going to be a more difficult game. And then they run into Liverpool away in game week 8. Now, after that, the 2 fixtures, Newcastle home, Man United away, not bad at all. But then it's Arsenal at home in 11. So if you're looking at Palmer for your own team, thinking, I'd love him, but now is not the right time for my team to buy him, maybe you can, again, console yourself by the next 2 fixtures. They don't scream mega hauls to me, but you never know. And I know now, of course, there's lots of stuff going around saying that Palmer is fixture proof, he can score against anyone. And of course he can, right? When you say things like, this player can do this, like, it could happen. Of course it could happen, but it doesn't mean it will happen. Like, you look at the matches so far, a blank against Bournemouth. And please remember that after Bournemouth, people were questioning whether Palmer was worth the money. That's how quickly the narrative changes. He had hardly any chances in that game. In fact, his XG was 0 and 0.03 expected assists. Really bad game for Palmer. You know, he didn't score against Palace. It was an assist. He has scored against West Ham. Didn't score against City this year, but fair enough, right? City are great. So in 3 games, he's not scored. Then you can just look at it and say he's got 6 goals, 4 assists. So yeah, he's just brilliant. I wish I got him on wildcard. I'm very tempted to take a hit to bring him in, which I'll talk about later on. 3 of the next 4 are good. And I think from 12 onwards, everybody, if they've not got him before the Arsenal game, is going to be looking to get him in. because you've got Leicester away in a week where, let me just double check this now. I think City got Spurs at home, which is probably fine to captain Haaland, but if you want to go against it, Palmer against Leicester away is probably one of the best fixtures that week. So is Salah against Southampton away. And then in game week 13, where Salah and Haaland are up against each other, Cole Palmer's got, where is it? Aston Villa at home. So again, you could probably captain him that week if you didn't want to go for Bruno Fernandes against Everton at home, which I'm sure most people wouldn't. So yeah, 12 onwards, the fixtures are just great. Leicester away, Villa at home, Southampton away, Spurs away, Brentford at home, Everton away, Fulham at home, Ipswich away. I think coming up, not necessarily right now, but from about game week 12 onwards, there's going to be some really big decisions to be made. Because Arsenal's fixtures get pretty good again. Like, they're good now, then they get a little bit worse, then they get good again. Liverpool's fixtures get good. Palmer's fixtures are good as well. You try and fit in Saka, Salah and Palmer. Guess what the best way to do that is? You take out Haaland. But right now, no one's obviously prepared to do that. So there's some big decisions to be made, I think, very strongly about how you structure your squad, which premium you get in. But it's very hard to sit here right now and argue that you should have like a Son over a Palmer. Although, from game week 8 onwards, for the next 3 or 4, Spurs fixtures are better. Just quickly, to answer one more thing, if you've got Saka, I think it's nuts to sell him before Southampton at home for Palmer. As good as Palmer's looked, and as much as you might want him going forward, and the fact that Saka blanked against Leicester, I just couldn't do it. Taking out any player before Southampton at home feels crazy, let alone Saka. He should have had returns himself in that game against Leicester. It can easily flip. And so you've missed that 4-game haul. It's not that he can't go and do it again. I just think you've got to keep Saka. So anyone thinking of that, I wouldn't do it. So this is going to feel like a bit of a reaction to yesterday's game, a little bit knee-jerky, but Brennan Johnson is looking like a pretty decent pick right now. He's not someone that gets to 90 minutes very often, but if you look at his recent form, goal and assist against Man United, he also hit the post as well. A goal against Brentford. He blanked against Arsenal, but fair enough, most attackers do, apart from James Justin, of course. An assist against Newcastle in 45 minutes. So he's played 90 minutes once against Everton in game week 2. Most of the other games he's hitting in and around the 70-minute mark. That's probably what you're going to get from him. But what I like about him is he kind of covers that 6.5 million-ish price point, where there aren't many options right now, and the fixtures that Spurs have coming up are decent. Like Brighton away, if they play like they did against Chelsea, and they don't have Van Heck as well, like that's just another really good game for Spurs. They already showed how good they were against Man United, and Man United were terrible, by the way, I get that, but Spurs were also just very good. You've got to give them credit as well. And then in 8, it's West Ham at home. West Ham all over the place at the moment. Palace away doesn't really feel like a bad fixture right now. And then you've got Villa at home, Ipswich at home, before Man City away in 12. And even after that, it's Fulham at home and Bournemouth away. So I would argue from now until game week 14, Spurs have got one bad fixture, and that's Man City away. They haven't got a perfect fixture in every other game week, but there's nothing there you'd worry about playing an attacker. And at 6.4 million, it's hard to find a player that's outright better than Brennan Johnson right now for that price. Obviously, you can go up in price and there's better players, but for 6.4, he's looking good. And his stats on Hub for per 90 numbers, 0.51 expected goals for the season, 0.09 expected assists. Again, you've got to put a little bit of context around that. He very rarely gets to 90 minutes. Before his price, he's a decent option. And he put up really good numbers last year as well. That's part of the reason I had him towards the end of the season. And if we just quickly look at players in and around that price, obviously Eze has just been super frustrating. He just dropped in price again. He's now 6.8 million. Most people not going there. If you go right down to the 5.5, Semenyo hasn't played yet, but he looks like a decent option. McNeil, obviously 2 goals yesterday. We're going to talk about him in a minute. They're all good. Madueke, 6.6. He's another player that often comes off early, not every time. He has made it to 90 minutes a couple. I'm struggling with Chelsea players outside of Palmer and maybe Jackson. And even in Jackson's case, I prefer Solanke going forward. So Palmer's really the only player that I would look at. I just think at any point there could be rotation there, or you could get an early sub. So Madueke's not really for me. Without going through this whole list of players, like Mitoma, it's not the right time probably to bring in a Brighton midfielder. Without going through the whole list, the only other player that I'd maybe consider is Garnacho. He's played 2 back-to-back 90s. In my opinion, he is probably Man United's best attacker and should be in that 11. There is some doubts going forward because Rashford and Amad Diallo could play. But for me, Garnacho's got to be in that team. He was one of the only players yesterday that came away with any credit. And whatever you think about Man United, the fixtures coming up are pretty good, and Garnacho probably will get returns. But would you go for him over a Brennan Johnson the way that Man United and Spurs are playing right now? Probably not. The only thing that Garnacho probably has when he starts is minutes. It's not going to be that often, I don't think, where he gets subbed off early. I think it's more going to be Rashford or Amad Diallo, whoever starts with Garnacho. So, yeah, like I said, it looks a bit knee-jerky now talking about Brennan Johnson, but a few people brought him up on the deadline stream. I quite like him for the price. I think one thing to think about is what position is he taking up in your team? If you bring him in, is there someone else you're going to want to put in there soon instead? That's something I'm going to consider, and I'm going to talk about that now in my team. But in isolation, 6.4, the fixtures Spurs have got coming up, how good they are in attack, the numbers that Brennan Johnson's putting up, the fact that Odegaard is out injured at the moment as well. So minutes-wise, it's pretty good for Johnson. Timo Werner is not taking his place anytime soon. The amount of attacks for Spurs yesterday that kind of just died because of Timo Werner, I don't know. He's just not getting in ahead of Johnson on that right side, is he? So, yeah, just another good pick. So I don't usually talk about my team in these videos, at least not outside of international breaks. But I think because I wildcarded in game week 6 and it was an utter disaster, I think I've got to talk about it. So pretty much everything that could go wrong went wrong. I ended up on Raya and Gabriel double Arsenal defence. They, of course, conceded 2 goals to Leicester at home. I think they conceded 0.27 expected goals. Absolutely insane. Rico Lewis started against Newcastle, played in midfield, 2 points. Trent Alexander-Arnold, who there was a little part of me thinking, do I need to go for him? I said the amount of fixtures that Liverpool have got coming up where I just don't expect a clean sheet is not ideal. And the fact that he's blanked against Wolves is really frustrating because that was probably the best fixture they had of the next 4 after wildcard. So that's already looking bad. In Burmo, great player, great FPL pick, 9 points, love him. Saka somehow blanked against Leicester in a game where they've scored 4 goals, and his stats were amazing, 3 points. He dropped from 3 bonus to 1 in that game. So we had the points, we had 5 points, and now it's back to 3. I'll come back to Bruno Fernandes in a second. Calvert-Lewin 1-pointer, a few chances, but also picked up a yellow card. Solanke I'm really happy with, because I think I could have gone for a different forward in that spot. I looked at the fixtures that Spurs had from 8 onwards, decided I wanted him. Man United away, Brighton away, probably not that bad for an attacker, and he's gone and got his goal. I think he will continue to get chances in that team. And Erling Haaland first blank of the season, I'm not particularly worried about that. That can happen, right? I said this weeks ago, players will blank, including Erling Haaland, including Mo Salah. It can happen. Bruno Fernandes red card, it's unlucky. Whatever you think about Bruno Fernandes as a pick, it's just unlucky when you get a red card. You have no control over it whatsoever. Some people saying that it shouldn't have been a red card. I don't know. I think the stud's in near the knee. You're just asking for trouble. I know he slipped, but I still think he could have pulled out of that tackle. I don't know, right? Maybe I've got it wrong. Either way, it happened. There's not much I can do about it. And I find the focus around him, like, I think it's kind of interesting, like, how much people are talking about him, because I've wildcarded. Bruno Fernandes has got a red card. That's all people are talking about. I've got 7 other players that have blanked. Absolutely insane. It's just an utter disaster of a wild card in the first game week. And if I hadn't gone for Bruno Fernandes, it would have been Eze, who blanked and dropped in price, or it would have been Diaz, who blanked. And I get it, right? Even with that blank, he scored 4 more points than Bruno. But again, what can I do about a red card? So I'm actually not... Obviously, I regret... In terms of, having a time machine, I regret buying him. I wish I got someone that didn't get a red card. But I actually don't think I'm that bothered about going for him without that hindsight. But I've got to decide what I'm doing going forward. And also I benched Morgan Rogers, which I knew was going to be a disaster, but I still feel like that was the right decision, probably. Maybe I could have set up in a way where I had an attacker that was easier to bench, take a bit more money out of the team. I don't know. I'm not going to worry about that too much. I like having squad depth. And also, by the way, I think there's a few things that have happened in the first few weeks, like in the first 6 game weeks, where it's just showing me that having squad depth is so handy. Like, even look at this week, okay? It's Bruno Fernandes this week. It could be a different player that gets a red card next week. Well, it doesn't matter because I've got Morgan Rogers who can come in. Now, he went off in the 63rd minute yesterday against Ipswich with a tight hamstring, apparently. If he's injured, well, I've got Pinnock on the bench. So I'm not forced into a transfer straight away. And that is one of the benefits of having that squad depth. That's just a side point anyway. What am I going to do with Bruno Fernandes? Some people are speculating that Man United might appeal and that 3-game ban will get dropped down. I don't see it. I don't think it will get overturned. I think it will stay at 3 games. Maybe it gets reduced. I'm in a tricky position where I've only got 1 free transfer. And there's not a huge amount of players that I can go to with no money in the bank, right? Brennan Johnson is one of them. But people are going to start pointing out over the next few weeks that I need Palmer or I need Son. And obviously, I'm not going to sell Saka before Southampton at home. Maybe before Bournemouth away I could do it. But I'm certainly not going to do it this week. Okay? And I might even get to the point where I've got so many issues to deal with, I just hold Saka because game week 12 onwards, like I said earlier, the Arsenal fixtures are really good. So might sell him, might not. And so if I want to fit in another premium, like without selling Haaland, by the way, like Son or Palmer, it's got to be in this Bruno Fernandes slot. There is no other position to put him because I wouldn't have enough money to do it. So if I do Fernandes to Jared Bowen, who's got Ipswich at home this week, Brennan Johnson, who's got that good run of fixtures, Luis Diaz, who obviously I could have gone for on wildcard and I didn't. If I do that, I've used a transfer, bought them in, and then if I want Palmer or Son later, I've lost a transfer to be able to do that, and I've put a player in that position. And ultimately, if Morgan Rogers is fit, and obviously we'll see Champions League games this week to know what his fitness levels are like, he's perfectly fine to play against that Man United midfield because it's absolutely terrible, and Villa are at home. And so rather than just rush in to sell Fernandes, which I know people are going to find really funny, but I'm just trying to talk through how I'm thinking about managing this team, I can deal with him with 2 free transfers in game week 8 rather than take a hit. The problem is, just to ramble on about this a little bit more, if I want to do Fernandes to Palmer, the only ways realistically to fund it for players that I'd actually want to sell are Trent or Solanke. So I'm not going to sell Saka before Southampton at home. Now, if I sell Solanke, I've got 5 million to spend. Basically, I'm buying a dud forward. And I also don't want to sell Solanke because the fixtures are coming up are really good. Or I sell Trent and I've got 4.5 million to spend. Now, personally, I think 4.5 million defender in Solanke is better than Trent and a dud forward, especially with the stuff that's just happened. Red card, possible injury to Rodgers. I don't want to weaken my squad overall. But let's say I go for Van der Ven. That's someone that people brought up on stream yesterday. Spurs have got good fixtures coming up. He's already got 2 assists this season. Not a bad pick, I would say. Let's just say I do that, right? Having Palmer in would be really nice. But I'm taking a -4 to get rid of Trent Alexander-Arnold before Palace away. That just doesn't feel right. Like if Rodgers starts as well for Villa, I'm basically spending 4 points to remove the best defender in the game. At least that's what everyone was saying last week. And to avoid having to play Rodgers against that Man United team. Can Palmer and Van der Ven and -4 outscore Rodgers and Trent? I think it's really close. And then I'd rather put the decision off until game week 8 with 2 free transfers. The only issue is I might be priced out because Palmer could go up in price again. Van der Ven with his 2nd assist of the season, he could go up as well. And then in game week 8, I can't afford it. But also, if I get to game week 8 with 2 free transfers, do I even really want to bring Palmer in before Liverpool away? So I know everyone's looking at it thinking, just sell Bruno. It's so obvious. Just buy anyone. But actually, when you start drilling down to exactly who you're going to bring in, it's a little bit trickier. So I wouldn't be surprised that by the time we get to the team selection video on Thursday, I'm sat here talking to you about why I've taken a hit to get Palmer in. There is part of me that just thinks do it. Like that team is pretty good. Even if Lewis becomes a massive problem, most weeks I can always play Gabriel. Got no need to bench him. I can play Van der Ven for most weeks coming up because of Spurs' good fixtures. Ipswich have got a decent fixture every now and then. They've got Everton at home in 8, Leicester at home in 10, Palace at home in 14, etc. And Brentford's fixtures are amazing. So apart from Man United away in 8, I could pretty much play Pinnock every single game if I wanted to. So although the defence would be cheap, maybe it wouldn't be that bad. But I'm not completely, but I'm restructuring my squad to what I decided to do in game week 6, and I'm not sure how much I should be overreacting to that. And by the way, if we get to game week 8 and I don't want Palmer and I've got 2 free transfers, the other option would be just to get Son if he's fit. Now, I know he's not as good as a pick as Palmer, but the fixtures are better. West Ham at home, Palace away, Villa at home, Ipswich at home, the next 4. And then, as I said, from game week 12 onwards, people will really want Palmer. Maybe I just get him then. So That's my team. Absolute disaster of a wild card. But the team looks like I'm not really panicking at all about it because the team looks great going forward. And like these kind of game weeks happen, it just hurts even more when they happen after a wild card. But it can happen in FPL. And I would not be surprised if this team pushes me right back up the ranks. Like I've gone from 1.3 to 3.1 million. I wouldn't be surprised if this pushes me right back up next week because I think on paper it looks pretty good. But that's the team. Disaster of a wild card. I've got to get rid of Fernandes eventually, but I think it's worth just waiting for more news. Let some of these European matches play and then decide what to do. I think taking a -4 to get rid of Bruno for Palmer is obvious, like on its own. It's just the getting rid of Trent. I don't know if I can get behind it, but we'll see. I think it would make me sleep easier at night if I just had him in. Anyway, I'm going to stop rambling about my team. Let's talk about a few more players. So it wasn't quite a Cole Palmer level of performance, but a lot of people impressed with Liam Delap this weekend, scoring 2 goals for Ipswich against Aston Villa, and he only cost 5.5 million. So I can see why people are interested. The fixture run for Ipswich is also pretty good. Next 4, West Ham away, Everton at home, Brentford away, Leicester at home is decent enough. It's Spurs away in 11, which is a little bit trickier. Then you've got Man United at home in 12. And even if you look after that, the fixtures aren't that bad. Forest away in 13, then Palace at home, Bournemouth at home, Wolves away. So from now until game week 16, there's not a huge amount of fixtures to worry about. I would still question how many goals Ipswich are going to score in those games. But I think if they're going to do it, it's probably going to be through Liam Delap. So at 5.5 million, as an option to sometimes have on your bench, sometimes play in the better fixtures, I think he's fine. He's on 4.2 points per game for the season so far. The only thing that would concern me is the expected goal numbers. 0.2 per 90 for a forward is pretty bad, right? There'll be defenders like Gabriel and Trent that overall expected goal involvement are pretty close to what Delap has put up. I think part of that is just playing for a newly promoted side. Part of it is also the fixtures they've had so far. Like Liverpool and City first 2 games was never going to be easy. They've also played Brighton away as well. And even Villa at home is not a super easy fixture. So to be fair, the fixtures haven't quite been there, but I would still worry a little bit about those numbers. But then you could just argue, well, he's just a 5.5 million forward most of the time. I'm not going to play him. That is perfectly reasonable. He looks to be fairly nailed on. I don't mind him as a pick, but I think he only really comes into people's teams in certain situations. Like if you're wildcarding this week, and again, you want that cheap forward, you don't want to go for a Jamie Vardy, fair enough. If you've got an Isak and you're looking to sell to a much cheaper forward to afford a move for Palmer, for example, again, fair enough. But I would say most people's 3 forwards they have right now don't need to be sold all of a sudden to Delap. So I wouldn't knee-jerk him in just because he scored a brace. He's not suddenly amazing or anything like that. But in certain situations, you could get him. Just on Jamie Vardy, because a few people will be looking at him now because the fixtures get a bit better. He's 5.7, so he's a bit more expensive, so it might come down to how much money you've got to spend. I'm not sure what to make of Vardy. Again, he just played Arsenal away, right? That's always going to be a tough game. But in 3 matches so far, Arsenal away, Everton at home, Villa at home, and Fulham away, he's put up 0 XG, which is not great. He's had hardly any shots this season. Okay, he put up 0.64 against Palace, fair enough. 0.8 against Spurs. He can still do it. But how regularly is he going to be troubling Premier League defences? I'm not so sure. Like, he has proven he can do it in some games, but in others he's had hardly any chances whatsoever. The fixtures are very good though. Bournemouth at home, Southampton away, Forest at home, Ipswich away, next 4. Then you run into Man United away, Chelsea at home. Then it's Brentford away, West Ham at home. I would say overall from like now until 16, the fixtures for Ipswich are maybe slightly better. There's not a huge amount in it. You probably need to decide which team you back more. I think from what we've seen so far, I'd maybe put Ipswich slightly further ahead of Leicester in terms of the amount of goals I expect them to score. Maybe I've got that wrong, and maybe it'll just be Leicester because Vardy, has just been such a great player and he's done it in the Premier League before. But he is obviously getting a little bit older now. I don't know. I think if this is a player that most weeks I'm not going to play, I just want a bit of squad depth on the bench, I think I just go for the slightly cheaper player of Delap for 5.5. The numbers aren't great, but then Vardy's numbers have not been great in most matches as well, and the fixtures are maybe a little bit better. So yeah, he's fine. Bring him in if you need to fund another move you're on wildcard, but otherwise you can probably ignore him for a bit longer. So I'm just going to go through some other notes from the weekend. Dwight McNeil, I feel like I've got to mention him again in this video. 5.5 million, he scored a brace at the weekend. That now takes his total, let me just double check here, He's got quite a few returns already. It is 3 goals, 2 assists. So 5 attacking returns in the first 6. The guy is absolutely nailed. He keeps playing in this number 10 position as well for Everton. I don't know if that will stick forever, but I think either way, he's probably just a good option going forward. And before I'm accused of knee-jerking with McNeil as well, I did say that a week or two ago. Someone asked me if he's being overlooked. And I said yes, but for the right reasons. The only time you'd probably look at bringing him in if you're on a wild card or something like that. Instead, I went for Semenyo. He hasn't played yet, so hopefully he does well. But honestly, someone like McNeil, if you need a cheap midfielder, you're just putting him in until probably game week 14 and just not worrying about him. The fixtures are just that good. And even when you get to the dodgy fixtures, you can just bench him. So he's not that big of a deal or big of an issue. If you want to go for McNeil, you absolutely should. But a bit like Delap, there's only in certain circumstances. Are you downgrading another midfielder? Are you wildcarding? He's not a sudden priority to put in your team. Morgan Rogers went off for the first time before the 90th minute. I guess that was always going to happen at some point. There's lots of stuff going around on social media about the fact that he had a tight hamstring. Now, I didn't watch that game, but apparently that's what the commentators have said. I've had a little look, and I can't see Unai Emery saying anything about him. So I don't know whether it's just a minor thing, a major thing, or what. Presumably, it's more likely to be a minor issue. We've got Champions League midweek, so we will know if he's in that squad. We'll know what kind of minutes he's going to get. I still think it's very positive that Duran has not started yet, and Rodgers keeps playing, and he keeps playing really well. So as long as he can stay fit, I think his minutes will still look good. But that is something to keep in mind. Raul Jimenez scored a penalty, so I mentioned Delap and Vardy as cheap options, but actually you could look at Raul Jimenez as well. He's 5.5 million, so the same price as Delap. The only thing to say is I think Andreas Pereira would have taken that penalty, but he just couldn't. I think he just got a knock or something. And apparently Marco Silva said after the game that Andreas Pereira would have been due to take the penalty. So I don't think that's a sign going forward that Jimenez will necessarily take the next one. But even without penalties at 5.5, he's probably quite a good option. The only thing that would worry me is how quickly Muniz got dropped. And if Jimenez starts to do badly, how quickly will he get dropped? I think that's less likely to happen with Vardy and Delap. And also it's Man City away this week for Fulham, so you're not going to bring him in anyway. But from game week 8 to 12, the fixtures are quite nice. Villa at home, Everton away, Brentford at home, Palace away, Wolves at home. But after that, you run straight into Spurs, Brighton, Arsenal, Liverpool. So I don't know. I don't think there's a rush on Jimenez or anything like that. And he's probably not on penalties. Son missed out. We knew that he had a bit of a hamstring issue from the European match they played against Karabag. I thought he was going to start, to be honest with you, because it's such a big game. And Ange Postecoglou said it wasn't like a major thing, but obviously it was big enough that he missed out. They didn't miss him whatsoever. They were so good against Man United. Annoying if you kept him, but the fixtures are good going forward, so do not make any rash decisions. Like Son to Palmer, fair enough if you want to do that, but honestly, Spurs fixtures are better over the next 5 or 6. I wouldn't be surprised if Son starts returning if he can get fit and stay fit. For Brentford, Vandenberg, 4 million defender, Schade, 5.4 million midfielder, and Carvalho, 4.8 million midfielder, all started. Now, is this a sign of things to come with Vandenberg? I'm not 100% sure. If I just bring up the Brentford team, I'm pretty sure, where is it here? Against West Ham, I think he played right back. Yeah. So it was a back four as expected, and it was Collins and Pinnock as expected as the centre backs. Vandenberg played right back. Will that remain? I'm not sure. He's still a bit of a risk, but as a fifth defender, if you want to risk it with the fixtures Brentford have got, don't hate that. Schade started, but the problem is he came off in the 59th minute. He's just not an option. Do not go anywhere near Schade. It's just not worth it. He played 45 minutes against City, 27 against Spurs, 59 against West Ham. I just wouldn't go there. If you're going to go for a cheap Brentford midfielder right now, it's got to be Carvalho. 86 and 84 minutes. He just seems to be more favoured than Schade, and he's cheaper as well. 4.8 is going to enable you to maybe go and get that Palmer, Son, Watkins, Haaland, Salah, whoever it might be that you want to bring in. You know, he's cheaper than Schade, he's getting more minutes. He's probably the one to go for. I think, again, Brentford's fixtures are fine, but unless you need that money for another move or you're on wildcard, I probably would just ignore them for now. Trossard and Martinelli, they keep playing, especially while Odegaard is out. I mean, Martinelli is just first choice left winger at the moment. Against Leicester, it was, let me just double check here. Yeah, 1 goal, 1 assist for Martinelli. And Trossard, 1 goal, 1 assist. Now, he only played 52 minutes against Man City, but I really wouldn't worry about that. It was a strange game. He's only got 1 goal before that, but obviously he wasn't always playing because of Odegaard. At the moment, he seems to be in that team, first choice 11. He's a nice punt going forward, 6.9 million for Trossard, and Martinelli is 6.9 as well. I guess if I was going to go for one of them, it'd probably be Martinelli because I think he's got more chance of staying in the team when players get back fit. But either work right now. Southampton are home, Bournemouth away, good, but it probably is a short-term punt. Then it's Liverpool, Newcastle away, Chelsea away, which is not so good. So you could look there if you're not already on triple or double or triple Arsenal, and you've got a free spot and you've got a midfielder to change. I wouldn't mind an Arsenal player, maybe instead of like a Brennan Johnson or a Garnacho. But I think if you're making a move and you just want it to stick for the next 6-7 game weeks, I'd probably choose Brennan Johnson instead still. And then the last thing on my notes, Maddison's stats are great. I looked them up on Hub, as always. Links in the description below. 50% off ends today. Don't forget that. And per 90 minutes this season, 0.35 non-penalty expected goals, 0.51 expected assists. He's playing so well at the moment. And I know against... I need to double check now. I'm recording this quite early in the morning on Monday, so I'm not quite with it. Yeah, no returns yesterday. I thought that was the case. And only 76 minutes. He does have a tendency to be brought off early. So again, you've got to put context around those stats. I just don't see how the returns don't come with the fixtures they've got. And so I've talked a lot about Brennan Johnson, but Maddison is absolutely right up there as an option as well. The thing is, why I find it hard to pick him is you're paying 1.1 million more for Brennan Johnson. You're not necessarily getting a massive amount more minutes. And Brennan Johnson gets into more goal-scoring positions. Like, Maddison might end up getting more returns overall, but a lot of them are going to be assists rather than goals, I think, whereas Brennan Johnson's going to score you more. I find it hard to make a case for Maddison. Like, he is a great pick in isolation, but I just don't know if I'd go for him over Brennan Johnson. But like I said, if you want to check out all the stats for all the players, plus all the other tools that Hub have got, links in the description below. I'm going to leave it there. Thank you very much for watching. Give it a like if you enjoyed it. Hit that subscribe button. Rate 5 stars if you're on podcast. I'll be back tomorrow with transfer tips, game week preview on Wednesday. I'll talk about my team again on Thursday. Maybe I'll have Cole Palmer in it at that point and no Bruno Fernandes, which will probably feel quite nice. But yeah, I'm going to leave it there. Thanks for watching. Catch you again tomorrow.